Welcome back to Purpose Room Podcast, where we explore the stories and strategies behind today's most inspiring purpose-forward brands. I'm your host, Doriana, and I'm on the road this week. And so today, I'm bringing back a powerful conversation that we had with Minty, aka Minty. We spoke with her last year. She's the founder of Mangrove, and she's built a really powerful tool that helps both businesses and investors prevent failure by mapping out the real risks and blind spots, from operations to market impact. If you've ever had a success or a failure and had a difficult time attributing it to something specific, you'll want to listen to this conversation. This conversation will give you a clearer way to measure what's working at your company and change the way that you think about strategy. So let's get into it. See you on the other side.
So I was consulting for Amazon, but I had a terrible colleague who then became my boss. Originally, it was kind of like, I want to automate this crazy lady out of her jobs. A lot of the reasons why businesses fail are completely preventable. What you want to understand is, what are the most important ones? Like, what is your secret sauce? And then how do we make sure that that doesn't harm you, doesn't harm your consumers, and doesn't harm the wider market? We need to think a little bit more holistically when we're just dishing out money. It's crazy how much money people are losing on companies that are just like a fancy idea.
If someone wants to create resilience into their business strategy, what's a good place for them to start?
The most amazing place for a business to start is
Here with Minty today. She's an expert in business strategy, specifically around incorporating sustainability, making sure businesses do not fail through structured framework.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm Minty. Really great to be here. A bit of background about myself. I'm a founder. I have a company called Mangrove, which is a software company, and I specialize in resilience consulting. So effectively what you said, I help businesses to build better, scale faster, and fail less.
So Minty, one of the things I really like to ask people is to know about the why behind why they're doing what they're doing.
Yes. I mean, I have a few whys, and I feel like they're just, each time I get a why, it kind of changes the trajectory of what I've been doing. But initially, I had a very traumatic experience with someone at one of my consulting companies. So I was consulting for Amazon, which was probably one of the nicer, larger contracts that I had. But I had a terrible colleague who then became my boss. And she just traumatized me, to be honest. I've never met someone so horrible. And it was so impactful that actually I decided that I was going to give up my career. And at that point, I'd had some really amazing clients like Goldman Sachs. I'd worked for the stock exchange in Germany. I'd worked for some really well-known asset managers in London. And I was just at that point, pretty traumatized. That's it. I'd finished my data science degree. I'm going to go be a data scientist. But then after a while, I had a friend come to me and say, actually, just reflect on stuff. You're amazing at what you do. Take some time. And maybe this is the why for you to go and actually start your business that you've been talking about for so long. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. It was like, how do I put a gap between me and my clients? How do I make sure that we automate the jobs of people like this so they can't maybe inflict pain on other people? And it started there. And I guess in that journey over time, I've had different whys and different impacts on people. And then I've moved into kind of the startup and venture capital space and working with businesses there. So, yeah.
So with this horrible colleague that turned into your boss, this was before you started your company?
So I was consulting. So the thing is, it's really interesting. I've always been working for myself. I've only ever had one full job, and that was my most recent job. So from the age of 15 to 26, 27, I've always worked for myself, but I never really saw it as a company. I just saw it as me selling my abilities to build strategy and stuff. For me, a business was something where you sell a product, or maybe you have people, maybe you have an office. I had kind of more of a traditional view of what a business was, because I was never really in this entrepreneur space until recently. So yeah, technically, I did have a business and I was working for myself, but I just saw it as consulting. So that's when I kind of pivoted and went into software, because I was I have a very unique perspective and I have a very simplified framework and it works in every type of business. So let's turn that into a product and sell that to the masses and make it accessible.
Yeah. So would you say, you said your friend came to you and was like, hold on, maybe you should change your perspective. Would you say that was kind of your aha moment where you kind of saw things differently, or was there another moment?
So through my experience of consulting with these really big companies, from the outside, they look very reputable and people expect them to be amazing and they want to know why they do so well. But realistically, they just have the capital and the access to the people to make sure that they can do that. And from this experience and being kind of in these companies and working with them, I realized like, oh, I'm the person that's doing this stuff. So why can't I bring that to other people? And then also, why am I putting myself in a concentration risk of working with just one client who's super demanding? How can I, so that was kind of my aha moment. But I was always a little bit too scared to go and do it because wherever I would go, I was too young. I was not educated enough. I wasn't technical enough. So you always face these barriers and I just didn't have the confidence in myself to go and do it. And I think this was like, they always say you have to hit rock bottom or like some type of lull to then move forward and think. So I hit that. And rather than starting my business, which I had been planning for such a long time, I was like throwing it away. And thankfully, I think you know Basir, he came to me and he knows me so well. And he was like, you can't, you're so passionate. You speak about this stuff. When you do it, you know, it brings you to life, like you need to turn this into something more positive. So that I think is, I always say to him, like, if that never happened, maybe I would never be where I am. You gave me that confidence so I think it was like an accumulation of hitting that rock bottom and then having someone who is so close to you say like they believe in you to be able to do something.
That's amazing. Your community is so important because they can see through the mess that you might be in the moment and be like, you know what, this isn't you. And really call you and bring you out of it.
100%. I was going to go be a data scientist. Like, although I knew I would make good money and I'd probably be great at it. It's like my passion is solving complex problems and helping people. And in my job, I can do those two things. So I think I'm really like, that is a very nice moment that I always reflect on whenever I'm having difficulties. Like, if I could do it then, I can do it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, shout out to Basir.
Yeah. So growing up every year, we lived in different places. We, you know, well, I mean, other than like our real formative years where we were in the Outback, we kind of like moved around a lot and we saw different things. Like not a lot of Australians have an appreciation or understanding for what it is like to grow up in the Outback. First of all, it is one of the most beautiful places. It's so remote and it's so unlike anything. But no, it was a really beautiful experience. I think I got to learn about a different culture and a different perspective and a different way of being. And then when we finally moved back to more formal schools and stuff and not just be taught by our parents, we then got to see kind of like the rest of how Australia is. So I have a deep appreciation for that. I think like that has really, like I'm comfortable anyway. You can literally put me in a tiny village in the middle of Colombia or India and I'm going to be fine. Just like I'm chill, whereas half my friends would be like freaking out. Other thing too, growing up in such a remote community, I think like intuitively people, or just by default, people are super resilient. And from a Western perspective, it doesn't seem like that because they don't live inside a house and they don't, you know, take normal medication and they don't go to school. But actually, when you think about the harsh environment of what it means to live in the Outback and survive, like, and be one of the oldest living species like on this planet, and I think like all of the things they talk about and the way that they approach like community and culture and that type of stuff, super resilient. So maybe there's something there that I've like learned from that and been inspired by. Yeah, I think it's kind of like an accumulation of things.
That's really interesting. When we talk about sustainability, most people think about the environment, or if they're thinking about it in terms of business, they'll think about it in terms of a product. So normally it's like that linear relationship that we have with a product. The immediate problem it solves, what happens when the product is finished, if they're really thinking about that. So with Mangrove and continuity, how do you encourage the startups that you're working with or larger companies to think about this in a more holistic way?
Yeah.
And when they're thinking about their business strategy, what does that look like?
So I think it's a matter of breaking down resilience into a simple way for people to understand. So resilience is kind of three key pillars. You have organizational resilience, which you think about from in terms of like harm to yourself as an organization. You also think about harm to your consumers. So what happens when things go wrong with your business? How many people are you hurting and in what way? And then finally, it's market, because some of these businesses are huge and the effects of like hurting so many customers, maybe it's businesses, maybe it's you have a white labeled product that's being sold or embedded into companies. So you have that market harm as well. So they're the kind of ways that I try and get companies to think about, because basically what happens in building a company is people find a problem, right? I'm going to fix this. They then build a product because they figure out the customer needs this product. Here's their needs. I've designed the product. Right. Then they forget about the problem and the customers, and they just focus on the product, and everything else kind of fades away. And this is actually, I think, one of the issues that you find a lot in like fintech and, you know, these like fast moving industries. They're only concerned about the product. And actually, if something goes wrong with your product, the bigger you are, the more problems you can cause to yourself, to your customers, and the market. So they're kind of like the three areas I spend a lot of time educating, you know, the businesses I work with on. And the way that I do that, and Mangrove does that, is we kind of approach your business like a recipe. So you may have 100 ingredients that make up your recipe of your business, but what you want to understand is, what are the most important ones? Like, what is your secret sauce? And then how do we make sure that that doesn't harm you, doesn't harm your consumers, and doesn't harm the wider market if you are in fact having that kind of impact. So that's it, kind of like in a nutshell. So it's just trying to get them to think just beyond the product and revenue and, you know, that type of stuff.
And growth, you know, all the keywords, right?
Yeah, exactly. But just bringing in a few more metrics, and making sure that things are solid. If something does go wrong, you know what's important and why, and you can react to a situation in an appropriate way, not just from a product perspective. Thinking about, okay, if this goes wrong, this is the type of harm we're going to cause. So how do we make sure we minimize those impacts?
Do you have an example of one of those pillars? So like a business case study of where they thought about the product, but there was some negative harm.
Yeah, for sure. So I recently worked for a big fintech company, and basically they're not just like a normal, you know, everyday kind of, their mission is like money without borders, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so the idea is that they want to be able to, people to be able to live and work and do whatever business, you know, globally without any, I guess, friction. But the thing is, when I was discussing with them and I was trying to bring these topics forward, they were thinking about themselves as a traditional bank. Like, oh no, we just have a spendings account. People can use a card. Realistically, that is not your profile. You have a product, which means people can spend money anywhere. So these may be people that live from overseas in your country. These may be people from this country, you know, on holiday. There may be businesses that pay contractors globally. And then also you white label this product to other fintech companies, to other recruitment companies, to other payroll companies. So their businesses can then use these products. That's a 3-level like amount of harm. So it was about sitting down and helping them to understand, okay, from a risk-based perspective, these are the type of questions I want to ask about your users and your demographic. You know, we came up with like kind of 4 profiles because they had already done research to understand who their users were. So you can use a lot of the information in the business to try and help them think about their products, like end-to-end customer journey and the harm that this could cause. So realistically, at the end of this, they went from being like, oh, we're just a traditional bank, to actually, we need to start thinking more about our platform product because we are embedding this into another company. And if that doesn't work, then that affects their customers and their customers. So it's a systemic thing. So yeah, that's kind of one example, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really great example. I think it's so common for businesses to think about the product itself and then maybe the immediate solution that they're providing versus the after effects. I think
the downstream impacts. Yeah.
I think a good example we were talking about a couple of weeks ago was Klarna.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
So like solving, you know, financing for day-to-day consumers, offering payment plans, but, you know, a couple of years later, it's contributing to a massive debt crisis. And a lot of people are taking on huge amounts of debt that they're not able to pay off. So of course, that's not something that was intentional, but it's one of those after effects that comes with it.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's really important. Like when you are thinking about, this is also why I'm so like stuck on this ecosystem crisis that we have in the startup world. It's like, have a problem, fix it for consumers, forget the consumers. Now just think about traction. Now just think about revenue, and like at all costs, forget about operational viability, forget about downstream impacts, forget about harm to consumers and market, like just make money. And then you have these toxic workplaces and you have all this harm. And I think if we took a moment to really think about the problems that we're trying to solve, and, you know, we had a little bit more of a holistic view of that. So even the way that an investor approaches a business to think about whether it is a viable option, we can't just look at, oh, this is the market size and how much money I'm going to make. It's all like, you know, there's no science or logic to it. And so I think we need to sit down and we need to think about a few different things. And so that's exactly why we decided to like design a dashboard for investors. So if they want to vet their company and make sure that their company has that ongoing viability, they can simply see individual risks or an aggregated portfolio risks based on these things that we've built in. So there's kind of 6 steps in building resilience in the framework, and you can check along the way to make sure that they're in place. And if they're not, you have very solid metrics to figure out what are your areas of concern and potentially the harm that this can cause.
Mhm.
And I think like we need to think a little bit more holistically when we're just dishing out money. It's crazy how much money people are losing
Yeah.
on companies that are just like a fancy idea.
Yeah, it is quite mind-boggling to think about and see numbers behind it.
It's like billions per year. It's mental.
It's insane. So a lot of our listeners will have their own business, some like medium-sized businesses, and they want to have a good profit, still making money with their business, of course, but also doing good and being conscious for the environment and people who are involved. So if someone wants to incorporate resilience into their business strategy, what's a good place for them to start?
So honestly, the most amazing place for a business to start is understanding their ingredients. So like typically to simplify this, we kind of help companies do that. So we have three main categories. We have assets, and these are things like your technologies, your third parties, and like the cloud solutions that you might use. We have workflows, and these are the processes that you do day to day. And then we have teams. And so we kind of map things out for them that way. And what happens is when you start to give people a visual element to their business, they start to understand some really amazing things. So it's like bottlenecks, which can actually cost them time and money. Concentration risks where they may have too much reliance on a third party or too much reliance on a team, and also redundancies. There's a whole lot of stuff in your business that just falls through the cracks and it's not connected anywhere. So when we start to build out this visual element of your business, you see all these things. And that's when you can save money, you can reduce risk of like failure, and also you can diversify things. In a lot of companies, I feel like concentration risk is one of the biggest areas of concern because, you have one person who knows everything. You have one vendor that does everything for you, and you don't realistically know what that looks like. The other side of our tool is when you do work with third parties, we've built in some very simple questionnaires. So to help founders know that they're actually bringing someone on board who is trustworthy and reliable and actually thinks about these things themselves. And so it helps you to understand the risks around your vendors as well. And, how you can maybe improve those relationships to make sure that if they do something crazy, it's not going to affect you and your customers. So yeah, I think it's really just about having that proper understanding of what your recipe is and why it's important. Yeah. That will really do so much for businesses.
So your tool Mangrove, it can be used both for startups and it's also for investors as well?
Yeah. So it's for startups and we have enterprise as well. It's literally the same, I guess, product. We have just made it extremely accessible for startups. So currently, if you are in the resilience market, you're looking at around 400,000 per year to be able to have resilience in your business, entry level. And then you have ongoing costs and you have people like me who need to manage those systems. So it's a very expensive thing. We simplified it and made it like, 15K a year for a startup. So, and like helping, it's obviously not as complex as those systems because you don't need to be a financial company, but you can gear towards that if you need. The idea is like, it's just giving you that really simplified way to be able to understand stuff. And then on the other side, you have all these beautiful metrics that you can supply to a VC or they can monitor you remotely as part of their portfolio. And then it helps both sides of the equations to ask the right questions. You can't manipulate stuff. You can't you know what I mean? Like it's just there and it's dynamic and it's live and it's consistently giving you the best version. And then we've built in like basically a version of me into the tool. It's like a co-pilot. So when you get stuck on something and you realize like, oh, I have a concentration risk, what does this mean? Step by step, it will show you screen by screen how you can either document and make sure that you look after this risk, or you can remove it from your business. So you don't actually need someone with skills to be able to come in and help you build a better business.
And that's super accessible, especially for smaller and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah.
Where, access to something like this or hiring a specialist in this area would be like a huge investment.
100%. You could give away equity and, get 10 advisors who could help you across a whole bunch of different areas, or you could get a tool that isn't going to take, equity in your company. It's at a very low cost and you could build this out and learn a lot of things about your business. A lot of the reasons why businesses fail are completely preventable. They just don't have oversight and clarity of all their ingredients. And then they don't know how to respond to stuff appropriately because they don't prioritize. So yeah, that's the idea is like we can hopefully help a lot of businesses get to the 5th year, get to the 10th year. Yeah.
What are some mistakes or common mistakes that you see businesses make when it comes to their strategy or like managing those risks?
First of all, not documenting and not caring about it. So that's
thing number one.
Stage one, we need to understand. No, but realistically, like a lot of companies will say, for instance, so like we were working with a company that helps with mobility of disabled people, kind of like Uber, but yeah. So,
Okay.
but they specialize in that. They were not aware of what their key products were. They thought that they knew what it was, but after we went through and we mapped everything and they answered the questions, they were like, we haven't even considered this. And then we started building out their services. They didn't realize what was actually involved in it. So a service is like your end-to-end delivery to a customer. And we put all these ingredients in it so you can see what's actually made up. And then it gives you, based on all of the scoring, it tells you what's important and why, because you've answered these questions to say there's customer impact, market impact, etc.
So what does it mean for them to have not understood like what their core offering really was?
I don't think it's necessarily like it's deliberate. It's just when you build a product and you start thinking about fixing a problem, you're not necessarily thinking about all of the impacts. You're really focused on the product and delivering that product and making sure that it works. But
And that one thing that you set out to do, even though you might be solving other.
yeah,
Okay.
precisely. Or you're so focused on this one because that is the main topic at the moment that realistically this one's your revenue generator. And this is the one. And so by putting these ingredients together, ranking them and, connecting them, you can see the dependencies, you can see the usage, you can see the importance, and you can prioritize and make better data decisions in your business. So I think it's not necessarily like deliberate. It's just by default that this happens.
I see.
Yeah.
It makes me think of another guest that we had on the show. Water is Basic. So they're a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we talked about it. Yeah.
So they set out to be building water wells and doing maintenance of water wells. But then some time in, they realized like, no, this isn't just about repairing wells. They're educating women and teaching them to do it and to have their own businesses.
Perfect example. Yeah.
So they had to completely change their messaging. And once that happened, like things took off. They got way more donations. Things skyrocketed.
Yeah. So that's one of the nice things that we've been getting from our pilot study is like many aha moments with our businesses. They're like, oh, damn, this is amazing. And they're like telling us, oh, it fixed this problem. And I was like, I didn't even think our tool was worth like in that area. So we're seeing these benefits of how people can leverage this information.
That's amazing. One of the really cool things from you telling me about it was that it helps you to be able to make those assessments and gives you the tools to be able to make the informed decision.
Yeah. And we can either guide you or you can go and do it by yourself, but like you have that choice because every business is different and every business has different risk thresholds. But coming back to that, if you don't document it and you don't have an understanding or some type of qualitative way to understand that, you can never document these risks and you can never have these informed discussions and think about how you move your business going forward. It's kind of like, being in the dark and like padding around, being like, oh, we're going to go over here.
Or just like going with the flow or just
your vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. Vibes. Just trying something, see if it works. Didn't work. We'll try something else.
Yeah.
But not having that, the data to really back that up.
Yeah. So I think, building a business is very difficult, but if you have clarity on things, it can really like change the trajectory of stuff.
Yeah. So what's your vision for Mangrove?
To be honest, my vision is to just work with a lot of amazing businesses. It's a passion for me to be able to see like these changes. Obviously, originally it was kind of like, I want to automate this crazy lady out of her jobs. No one has to deal with her again.
Or people like her. Yeah, that's some motivation, honestly.
Yeah, of course.
She must have been a real treat.
Yeah. But then through that process, I think like I would have never gone down this path and I never would have met all these amazing entrepreneurs and learned about all these businesses and seen like the problem isn't just with the businesses being built. It's with the VCs investing money, not understanding, the huge variety of businesses and models and stuff like that. So it's just really like it's a passion and an enjoyment for me to be able to be part of all of these different businesses and maybe help them to be more sustainable or get better outcomes. And we're not talking like, oh, I want every business to be a unicorn. It's like if this business, which is, for instance, like one that I'm working with, they're digitizing, I guess, the recruitment process in Uganda. So previously what would happen is you have businesses hiring people. Maybe the people they're hiring are not as good as they say, or maybe they do the work and there's no accountability. And so that, it's already a place where people need to make money. So they're kind of like the middleman in that. They're digitizing that, allowing talent to be contacted from all over Africa and all over the world, but then making sure that there's a level of accountability. And then through this process of them earning wages and stuff, they start building credit reports so then they can get access to different things. If a particular person maybe necessarily doesn't have the skills, they allow them to go and do training. So it's just like this really amazing platform. I can work with them They actually just got acquired recently. And so this whole process helped with the acquisition because they had clarity over what their business processes are. They have a really good inventory of stuff. So like there's all these different ways you can use this information. And for me, that's really exciting and really like fulfilling to be like, oh, I got to help in some kind of way. Yeah, and I love that. And then I'm like, I'm learning from everything, and then I can bring this to other people. And so that's exciting. And then obviously that also feeds into my blog when I meet these amazing entrepreneurs. I take their learnings and I try and like incorporate that, and building a lot of educational material around resilience for startups and venture capital firms at the moment. So we have like a newsletter where we try and share regulations or resilience success and failures. And we talk about interesting resilience practitioners. And so it's really trying to like get the information from being concentrated in these very, you know, like high corporate environments to being accessible and being able to use them in other industries.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun. I love it.
Building a business from the ground up, it comes with a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And being a woman on top of it, it's got its own set of unique ones as well.
It does.
What are some things that you've had to overcome, or maybe some things that you're still dealing with?
I think the key thing, even in consulting, like as a woman, you know, I think I was like 20 something when I was really early in my 20s when I got the job with Goldman Sachs. A lot of the guys were like, you're so young. What do you know? You know, how come you get an office and all this type of stuff? And I was like, to be honest, I don't know. I'm just here. But I had to be very professional. So like, I will always try and prove myself through the application of my skills. When people see you actually making traction in a difficult environment, people will then tend to lean into it. The other thing too is people will always try and like put things and roadblocks, and especially as a woman, if you're working in a primarily male industry, you know, and I just took a lot of that in my stride, and I allowed that to be like, okay, if that is your perspective, then maybe I need to go and get more educated on a topic, or maybe I need to build something so you can practically see something tangible about what I'm doing. So at times it does get the better of you, but then, you know, like, so for instance, in my current business, I struggle a lot with VCs when I do speak to them because they don't believe my technology works because I'm a woman who's not technical and I went and built a software company. So at one point I went and found a male who I'm so grateful I have now, Abdul, because he's amazing. The minute that he came on board, nobody questioned anything, you know, because Abdul must have been part of this. So that was kind of something that was a little humbling and like a little frustrating at the same time.
I imagine. I can't believe, but I can believe, you know, VC responses just saying like, no, you're a woman, you couldn't have done this.
Literally. So I think like you're always going to come into these challenges, but you know, you learn from them. You've just got to like sit with it and think about, okay, what is my strategy to overcome this problem? Because if you allow it to consistently confront you and break you down, you're never going to get anywhere. And then it's easier to then break down barriers. So I think like that is really key, especially when you're always approached with these types of animosities and biases.
I guess my next question for you is, when you think about what you want to be remembered for, what does that look like for you after you're long gone? This is a question I like to ask everyone who's on the show.
This is also like, I love to ask people, what does your future look like? Best scenario. I think it's just mainly about like making resilience accessible, you know, and making it simplified. It doesn't need to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be, you know, an isolated advantage for global conglomerates and finance companies. This is something that's broadly applicable and can really make a difference. So if I manage to do that knowledge transfer and make it accessible, I'd be happy with that. Yeah. Doesn't have to be anything like money or whatever.
That's beautiful. Amen. Well, thank you so much, Minty. I feel like this was such a really good conversation, and love learning a little bit more about, you know, your background and with what you're doing with Mangrove too, and how you're helping businesses.
Well, thanks for having me. I love your podcast. So
Thank you. Good. Okay, we'll cut it here.